Hi there, and welcome to All Knit If I Want To. I'm Andrea Murray of Drea Renee Knits, and this is a little weekly podcast where I try my best to answer some of your questions. Today I'm wearing my So Faded sweater, and I'll stand up a little bit so you can see a little more of it. I've knit a few of these. I apparently should have done a little steam block. I didn't even notice that all day, but now that I'm recording, I can see the wrinkle. But anyways, that is what I'm wearing. This one is 3 colorways that I blended together. The bottom 2, I'm pretty sure, are La Bien-Aimée, and then the top one is Ushatita. Is that how you say it? Ushatita? I think that's how you say it. Anyways, I made it a few years ago, and it's my favorite of the ones I've made. I just love these colors together a whole lot. And this one I am wearing inside out. So I knit it to be worn inside out because I actually love the way that the reverse stockinette really blends the colors of the fade. So that's what I'm wearing today. And let's go ahead and jump into some questions. I did not have an episode last week. Gosh, has it only been a week? Time is weird these days. I don't know if it's getting into my 40s or what, but time is moving in an odd way. But yes, last week I got to celebrate my nephew's high school graduation, and it was so good. It was so good to see my nephews and to see all my siblings. I am number 4 of 5 kids, and thankfully my little sister lives right down the road now that we're both back in Michigan. But all my other siblings live in different states, and so it's really rare that we all get to be at the same place at the same time. And this was one of those times, and it was so good. It was such good fill-up time. Makes me miss them a lot and wish that we all lived closer. But yeah, it was so good. So good to be with family. And now I'm excited to be back and answering some of your questions. So let's go ahead and jump right in. All right. You might have already answered this question before. I don't think I have. But what do you think about running, hiking, or otherwise exercising in hand knit socks? I want to get as much use out of my hand knit socks as I can, but I'm also worried that these types of activities would just be too hard on my precious hand knit socks. Of course, I'd use a durable sock yarn with nylon and high twist and make sure my gauge is tight. But do you have any pattern suggestions that would be suitable for athletic socks? Any other things I should consider? So, while I begin to answer this, I know we've had a whole big discussion on socks, and we've done a lot of discussing socks. I keep all the questions y'all have asked that have made it to an episode so I can search back, and there's like 25 just popped up, so I may have to do a little digging. I wonder if I could even look it up. Favorite sock yarn. Okay, we're just gonna see if it pulls anything up. But yes, I hike in hand knit socks all the time. That would be my preferred sock for hiking, is definitely my hand knit socks, especially if I'm hiking in fall, winter, spring. Summer, I've hiked in hand knit socks in the summertime too. Especially like when we went to Iceland, I think I only brought hand knit socks, and they were great. I don't know if I've ever told this story here, but we were doing the photo shoot for my Sprite sweater on the Diamond Beach in Iceland, and it's black sand and chunks of glacier just wash up on the beach. That's why it's called Diamond Beach. It just looks like these huge crystalline diamonds are on this black sand beach. It's stunning. And a wave came up on shore much further than we had anticipated. It was like all of a sudden a big one rolled in, and I got soaked up to my knees. Like, it just got me. And it was the beginning of our day. We were doing the photo shoot quick, and then we were going hiking and checking out the lagoon and everything. And so Thankfully, I was wearing hand knit socks because my feet never got cold. I didn't get any blisters. I was totally fine, even though I got totally drenched from the knee down in very, very, very cold ocean water. But my feet stayed really warm and insulated, and I was so grateful that I was wearing hand knit socks that day. So I think that hand knit socks are so wonderful and that we should wear them all the time. Now, as far as running, I have run in hand knit socks, but I don't think I loved it. I did, so I'm not running much anymore. But when I did, I would wear wool socks, just not my hand knit ones. I do have that same concern of I just don't want to wear through them fast. And with running, I just feel like there's a little more friction, especially because with running shoes in general, you don't want them to be overly tight because depending on the distance you're running, your feet can swell a little bit and you want to have room for that in your running shoes. So there's just more chance for that sliding friction motion to wear a hole into your hand knit socks. That being said, there's not a reason why you can't do it. It would just be kind of personal preference. So I would try it out and see how it feels, but 100% I would wear them for walking and hiking. Absolutely. I can't really think of what other exercise. I bet there's people out there who wear them for all the things, and I would love if they wanted to chime in on their experience with that. But we have talked about before what everyone's favorite sock yarn is they feel like stands up really well. And so a lot of people chimed into the comments of that one about their favorites that were just really long lasting, and those would probably be the yarns I would go for when you specifically know you're going to be a little bit harder on those socks. You know, sometimes if I'm using a yarn that's a little more precious to me, that I also know maybe isn't the sturdiest yarn to use for socks, but I'm choosing to do that anyway. Sometimes I'll even make those like my house socks that I want to wear. Like I sleep in socks almost every night. I at least have to start the night off in socks because if my feet are all cold, I cannot fall asleep. So I always have a pair of hand knit socks like rolled up next to my bed that I pretty much always have to put on to fall asleep. So there I might use a more precious or like a softer yarn because I'm not gonna walk holes and I'm super fast because I'm not walking while I'm sleeping. So I think using like different yarns for different socks depending on what you plan to do with them, but I would definitely go for a hard wearing sock yarn, which it sounds like you also already are really aware of the things that can help longevity of socks, such as making sure you have a tight gauge. Nylon in the sock yarn can be helpful, or other strengthening fibers such as silk can really help strengthen a sock yarn. Okay, I'm gonna peek through some of these for sure. If I can find the episode where I asked for people to tell me about their favorite sock yarns, I feel like we've probably even done it more than once. But I'll link it below if I can find it, because I know we've talked about it. But you know, if you're watching this and you're like, hey, one of my favorite discussions, let's do it again, feel free to just tell us again, like, oh, I knit my socks out of this, they've lasted so great, I use them for physical activity. Please feel free to pop it below, because it's one of those things that like we always want to know. I should start like a spreadsheet. Something I know I won't do, but I sometimes wish I was that organized. I bet it exists. I bet it exists out there that somebody's put a spreadsheet together of like the strongest sock yarns. Okay, let's go ahead and go to the next question. You know what I don't have over here? My water. Kind of wish I did, but we're just gonna keep on going. Okay. I just had a moment of wondering if anybody has ever watched this and if they think I'm serious when I'm singing. Because my singing voice leaves a lot to be desired. But you know, like there are people who have a really good singing voice and they like sing all the time and they really go for it. I'm not one of those people. I'm aware of the caliber of my singing voice. I just had a moment of thinking of like, oh, people who don't know me might think that I'm trying to, what is it called? Not daylight. We have like another job. Anyways, next question. Okay. Sometimes I buy knitting magazines to get some inspiration. However, I rarely knit the actual designs I see there because they're almost always knit in pieces and sewn up. I've even seen some colorwork sweaters and raglans designed to be knit in pieces, which always makes me puzzled. Why would someone go through all that trouble to knit a raglan in pieces instead of in the round? To be clear, these are new designs, not vintage ones. Are there any advantages of designing and knitting sweaters in pieces? I'd love to hear your thoughts. So definitely there are absolutely people out there who prefer to knit in pieces, who don't like to do seamless knitting. And I think one of the biggest parts of that is the structure that it can create. So when you have seams, when you have seams, then that is in knitting a place where you can get a little bit more structure and a little bit more security. So we've talked about this with like a shoulder seam before or a neckline. When we don't have anything there to offer stability, there can sometimes be more growth than we want or that we anticipated because of gravity hanging on that knitting with no very strong structure points to keep things a little snapped together. It's like I take a week off and forget how to do this. And I also know somebody who's a sewist and they just prefer the idea of piecing garments together. It's how their brain works. It's what they like. So they really opt for seamed garments, even in their knitting. And back in the day, that's how pretty much everything was designed, was in pieces. So I think a lot of people, we tend to gravitate towards what we know when it comes to like our comfort zones when we're making. So if you started off knitting seamless sweaters, that's probably where you're comfortable. You understand the construction of that now. You've done it a few times and that just feels good. It feels intuitive. Or somebody else, if when they started off, they were piecing sweaters together, that's how they know to think about it, and maybe they really like the structure of what happens with those seams. There are also design elements that can occur in different ways depending if you're doing seamless or seamed. Some of them are transferable, but not all of them. And so I think that especially designers who got started a longer time ago, when that was the norm, was to do pieced sweaters, that is probably how their designs take shape in their mind. Again, kind of going to that comfort zone place. So I think we all have just our personal preferences. It's one of the things I've talked about a lot in regards to one of the things I really love about knitting is that there's always different ways to do things. So maybe you don't like knitting top down. Maybe you don't like knitting bottom up. Maybe you don't like knitting seamless garments. Maybe you do. There's just always all these different ways to do it. It was actually, I think it was Hannah Fettig. Hers were seamless, but I have a memory of one of her books. She did, I think, every pattern both bottom up or top down. Anyways, I digress. It's just another, like, we all have ways that we like to put things together. And I remember one of the first design books I ever looked at, the author felt very strongly that all knit garments should be seamed. She did not like seamless garments and did not think that that is the way they should be designed. So I think it's something that people can feel very strongly about. But one of the biggest reasons I can think to do it is just because of that structure it adds. So yeah, there you go. one of the nice things about and I'll flip it and say one of the really nice things about doing seamless knits is you can try them on as you go. And I think that's one of the things that's really pulled people into it is, you know, you can sew with on a sewing machine with fabric, you can sew a garment in a day. You know, sewing can be fairly quick in that way, where knitting, you are creating the fabric that you're turning into something, and it tends to be a much slower process. So to put in all that time, and then if it's been seamed and you try it on and it doesn't fit properly, well, now you've got to undo seams, you've got to unravel to do tweaks. So when it's seamless, there is that idea of like, well, I can try this on as I go and make sure that it's fitting correctly. I can add or subtract length. It gives you a little bit more modification ease as you're doing it. Now, if you are a more advanced knitter who's been doing it for a lot, you might already know the modifications you need to make even to a seamed garment. But not all of us are gonna be able to do that without some practice. So anyways, there's my thoughts on that. And okay, just wanted to make sure there wasn't any other little bits I hadn't seen in there. Any extra questions? Okay, so how do you wash your garments with buttons? When I wet block a cardigan, I do so before adding buttons. But after 5 years of knitting, I'm just now encountering this predicament in which I want to hand wash a cardigan with buttons attached. They are wood, and I'm afraid soaking the buttons will warp them. I thought about steam blocking, however, I'm aiming for a deep clean before storing my hand knits for winter. So a second question I'm sneaking in is, if the solution to protecting the buttons is to steam the garment, does steam remove the dirts and oils from your skin the same way soaking it does, so you can comfortably store away? Okay, so first of all, the way I would do it is I would still wet block the garment with the buttons on there. You don't need to really let that sweater soak for more than 15 minutes, and I don't think that 15 minutes is going to warp your buttons. I also think that if you feel like the wood has dried out or anything like that, you could put, and you'd want to be careful, but you could put something to block the sweater underneath the button. It could be a paper towel, just a little bit of cardboard, something to protect it. And you could take a little bit of oil and oil like the top of the button. Just, you wouldn't want it to get on the sweater. So carefully oiling the button to keep that wood from getting too dry once the moisture has dried out of it from soaking it. But like, I use wood cutting boards. I'm still washing those, and then I just take care of them by adding some oil or wood conditioner. So you could do something like that. I personally definitely prefer to block my knits than steam blocking if I'm trying to get them clean. I think a certain temperature from the steam could do things like kill bacteria, but it's not going to remove skin cells and stuff, and dirt and things like that. So I would still want to give it a bath. If anybody else is thinking about this differently though, please feel free to chime in. And if anybody happens to make or sell wood buttons and you have some care tips, I'm gonna do that really quick. Caring for wood buttons on a garment. Let's just see if anything pops up. Yeah. Honestly, I think it's going to be totally fine. They're not bonking around in a washing machine, so I don't think you have to be worried about them cracking. But this would be a time, like I've talked on here before about how I really like to soak my knits for a long time. I'll just leave them in there till the water cools off. Well, if I was concerned about something like the buttons, I just wouldn't let it. You don't have to let it linger in the tub for a long time. That's when I would maybe stick to 15 minutes. I want to know that the yarn's all getting saturated, and but then I would pull it out and just saw this one. Okay. Wood buttons. My sister Knits actually has a thing all about buttons. It says, avoid soaking in water, use no harsh detergents or bleaches. Laminated and inlaid wood buttons can withstand reasonable laundering conditions, but use precautions at the dry cleaner. We aren't talking about dry cleaning anyways. Okay, so yeah, I think here's another thing you can do. I think I would feel comfortable doing a quick block. We're not keeping it in there for an hour. We're just letting it soak enough to saturate that yarn. Maybe it won't even take 15 minutes. But if you're worried about it, because buttons can be spendy. There are times when buttons are not super inexpensive and you don't want to invest in that and then have it get ruined because you had to wash your sweater. So sometimes I buy buttons and they come on like a little piece of cardboard and there might be, let's say 6 buttons on there, but maybe I only needed 5. If you happen to have an extra button or a button similar hanging out in your button jar, try throwing that in a bath for 15 minutes. Then let it dry. See if anything negative happens to it that would make you feel upset. Worst comes to worse, you could remove your buttons and then put them back on after washing. That seems like a pain in the behind to me that I would like to avoid. But I also don't want you to tell you to do something and have you be like, oh, I haven't had an issue thus far with wood buttons. And I definitely have sweaters with wood buttons on them. I haven't had any problems. But if you are worried, test it. Get a similar button, let it sit in some water. But I just don't think, I mean, think about it. There's times where like we might get caught out in the rain for a while. And like, I don't think those wood buttons would be destroyed. So if anything, you just want to keep them from splitting. So if they're not soaking for too long, they're not going to soak up too much water and then dry and crack. So that is the one thing I would want to be careful of personally. And that's where I think once they're dry, rubbing a little oil on them to try and keep them in tip-top condition. But please, if anyone out there has more button knowledge than I do, share it with us below. Okay. Ooh, these are a couple very good ones coming up that have a little bit to do with like modification. So I'm knitting the Come Back Again cardigan. Looking at the schematics, I think I'm 2 different sizes. I want the 46 inch. I need to do like la 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 la. like mouth exercises before I start these. I want the 46-inch chest circumference, but I want the 16-inch instead of 14-inch upper arm circumference. I'm wondering though, if I make the upper arm 16 inches around and the body 46 inches, am I then going to run into problems with the raglan decreases once I join the body and sleeves? How would you go about adding circumference to the upper arms? Okay, so generally speaking, this is where raglan shaping or raglan grading is actually going to benefit you, because what happens is to have in a raglan sweater, to have the proportions stay, why can't I think of my words right now? Let me rewind a little. Here's the thing about raglans, and I think I have mentioned this on here before, is we tend to think about them as at least when I was first learning how to design and how to knit garments in general, we kind of think of raglans as being like, ooh, this is a great, like easy one to start off with, because generally speaking, we think of it as all you have to do is increase on either side or decrease, depending top down, bottom up. So I'll say decrease because we're going bottom up for this one. All we have to do is decrease 1 stitch on either side of the raglans, and we have 4 of those. And if you just do that, you'll be good. You'll shape your yoke, you'll end up with a neck hole, good to go. But here's the thing. We don't always want those proportions. We don't always want that size sleeve and how many decreases that would take, doesn't always match up perfectly with how many decreases we need out of the yoke. It can vary. And for me, it always does. Every size tends to end up having at least a small discrepancy between how many decreases we work on the yoke versus how many we're going to do in the sleeve. And generally speaking, we need more here than here. So why this will work out for you is if you fast forward, let me see if I can actually pull this one up. If you go to where we've attached the whole yoke sleeves together, so I gotta find my file here. Okay, so I am gonna even look at this size. We are looking at size 4 and kind of blending it with size 5, I believe, 6, okay. All right, so if you look, and I'm gonna go to here, we have, you're gonna see on page 8 of your pattern, I do what I call a tick sheet, and I think it makes it a little bit easier to follow raglan shaping because of these different rates of shaping. So as I said, there are gonna be times where we are decreasing on both sides of this raglan. Other times we're only gonna be decreasing on the body side, not the sleeve side. But because you have attached more stitches in the sleeve to the body for that size, you can take advantage of the spots where originally I didn't have you decreasing, because you'll still want to end up with the correct amount by the time you get up here. So you have to decrease out the extra stitches you have from doing the size 6 sleeves with the size 4 body. So if you look at your little tick sheet, yoke tracking chart on page 8, you're gonna see different colors. And so you're gonna see there's a few different ones, but the ones I'm gonna talk about just to make it easy are the yellow and the turquoise. The yellow boxes are when we are doing the decrease everywhere. We're doing it body and sleeves. The turquoise boxes, we are only decreasing on the body, but you, my friend, will still want to decrease on the sleeves. So you do want to do some pretty simple math of figuring out, okay, how many more stitches do I have using the size 6 sleeves than the size 4 sleeves? And those are the extra stitches you need to make sure you're decreasing out to get you to the right stitch count by the neck. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. You have at least 12 extra opportunities to decrease out stitches on the sleeve side that aren't currently written into the size 4. So let's say you have 24 extra stitches. Let's just take a little peek here and see if I can't get you there. Okay. So for the sleeves, we have a difference of 58 and 72. And you won't even need that many. If I'm reading, I'm trying to only look very quickly because for everyone who doesn't need this help, I don't want to turn it into a snooze fest, but I'm only looking really, really quickly. And so don't quote me on this. Definitely please check yourself. But I think it's only a discrepancy of like 12 stitches, which should make sense. Let's look at our gauge is, yeah. That should be about right. So you're only gonna need half of those extra decrease spots that you would go into. So what I would do is I would go to your little tracking chart on page 8, and I would actually start from the bottom of it further away. Basically, you're going to need to use 6 of those 12 no sleeve decreasing spots. 6 of them you are going to decrease. And so I would skip the first 6. I would keep those as they are in the pattern, but I would begin decreasing with the body sooner with the second 6. So again, they're going to be either turquoise or pink boxes. And I only counted really quickly, but I think there was 12 that you have open. You're going to use half of them. And then you're going to be to the correct stitch count by the time you're getting to the top of that yoke. You'll have the sleeve size you want, the chest size you want, and you should be good. So I hope that all made sense and wasn't too disjointed. But I love this question because it is one of those ones that is a really common modification people like to make by adjusting the sleeves, and hopefully that showed that it is pretty approachable without having to do a lot because of how raglans are shaped and the fact that there's that discrepancy. So it actually really works out in your favor. Okay. Question number 5 is another little modification one. So I'm currently working on the DRK Everyday Cardi and was looking ahead to the button band instructions and wondered if I will need to pick up extra stitches as if I'm planning on adding 1 to 2 inches of length to the cardigan. I'm making a size 3, but will probably add a little length. Will I need to pick up more button band stitches than the 174 on each side as instructed? If so, how do I determine how many more I need to pick up? Okay, so let's look at that one real quick. I actually had it open. Yes. I just love when I feel a little prepared. Okay. So for the button band in this one, first let me look at your row gauge because that is what's going to determine it. So we have got 33 divided by 4. So we're just going to do an average of 8. Okay, so with this button band, you are picking up stitches in almost every row, except for the bottom ribbing is where it kind of reverts to our typical 5 out of 7 pickup ratio. I've talked about it on here before. That generally is the perfect pickup ratio for a button band that's being knit out from a body. For the applied button band, we want to be a little bit closer to 1 stitch per 1 row, but the ribbing at the bottom of your sweater is a tighter gauge. So that's where we don't want to stick to that 1-to-1, and we generally want to do closer to that 5 out of 7. So you would pick up 2 stitches, skip 1, pick up 3 stitches, skip 1, and that's how we get the 5 out of 7. But for you, if you are adding 1 to 2 inches of length, you're adding probably between 8 to 16 rows onto this sweater, which means you're going to need to add 8 to 16 stitches into that button band approximately. And so that's a pretty good estimate, somewhere between there. What you're going to really have to pay attention to is spacing your buttonholes and your buttons. So you said you were doing size 3. How many buttons do you need for a size 3? So you're gonna need 8 buttons. So what I would do, let me see how far apart you currently have them spread out. Come on. Buttonhole, here we go. Okay, so you aren't adding enough to probably need a whole extra buttonhole. I think what I would do instead is not pretend, but you are going to space. It would actually work out really well since you're doing 8 buttons. It actually works really well if you're doing 8 to 16 extra stitches, because basically between each buttonhole, you'll just want to think of it being like 1 extra row between each, or 2 extra rows between each. So where it's telling you when you're placing your buttonholes, it says you're going to repeat placing them. You're going to repeat rows 1 and 2, which is basically working even. 17, well, it depends on your size, 15 more times. So for you, you would bump that up to like 16 more times would give you the 2 rows. That's what you just need to have it spaced like that little bit, 1 to 2 rows further that you had to add for your extra length so that your buttons are still even. That makes sense? I hope so. So yeah, that's really what you'll need to do. Pick up about 8 to 12 extra stitches and just make sure that they are going to land in between. And you know what I do to make it real easy is go ahead and place locking stitch markers. You can pre-place your buttonholes like where they're going to go with locking stitch markers. So count your rows. Sorry, I got a little fuzzy. Count your rows, put a locking stitch marker. You've got your buttonhole, which takes however many rows. How many rows did I use for this? Looks like you use about 12 rows for a buttonhole. So you're going to count, place your other one, which will look like 6 rows because this is a double knit button band. But count your rows and then place another. So however many stitches you end up having to cast on, pre-place using locking stitch markers where your buttonholes are going to go, and then you're going to know that it's going to be as even as possible. Let's say you end up with 1 extra stitch that you've picked up. They're like, oh, I don't have this perfectly even. That's not a big deal. Just throw that extra stitch to the very bottom or the very top of your button band. You're never going to notice it. But pre-placing, pre-marking things out will save you a lot of grief. It also, one of the reasons I love doing it is because then I just work to the next stitch marker and I know, oh, okay, now I have to do my buttonhole thing again. And I go back to those directions, work my buttonhole, and then I know I work even. So it takes some of the counting or the row counter, it kind of takes that part out of it if you just pre-block it out with some stitch markers. So there you go. I hope that helps. And that is our last question. This is a little bit of a longer one today. And ooh, we have a new pattern coming out next week on Tuesday. So stay tuned for that. If you are not subscribed to my newsletter, now would be a good time. I did not send one out the past couple weeks while I was with family, but there will be one coming out next Tuesday with a special subscriber only discount for this new pattern that I can't wait to share with all of you. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope to see you back here next week. If you would like to ask a question, you can go ahead and scroll down to the bottom of the description. There's a link you can click. And if you want to be notified when a new episode is out, you can hit the subscribe button and you'll be notified. All right. I hope that you have a wonderful weekend and I hope to see you back here soon. Bye.